In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where stars burn like ancient candles in an endless cathedral of darkness, there existed truths that civilizations were never meant to discover. Some secrets were buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and political maneuvering. Others were hidden behind the gentle lies that advanced species told themselves about their own nobility. But the most dangerous secrets, those were kept in plain sight. The hegemony station orbited the binary star system of Galactic, a massive construct of crystalline metal and bioluminescent corridors that had served as the de facto capital of galactic civilization for over 12,000 years. Within its corridors walked representatives from 437 different species, each carrying the weight of entire worlds on their shoulders. Admiral Corvash Al-Tar stood at the observation deck of Sector 7, his 6 arms folded behind his chitinous back as he watched the endless dance of starships arriving and departing from the station's many docking bays. The Krillion's compound eyes tracked each vessel with mechanical precision, freighters from the outer rim carrying rare minerals, diplomatic cruisers bearing ambassadors from the core worlds, and sleek warships that officially didn't exist in any fleet registry. Not officially. None of them spoke of Earth. Behind him, the soft whisper of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of his oldest colleague and greatest rival. Their asking questions again came the melodic voice of Counselor Lirthana, her crystalline form catching the light from the binary stars and casting prismatic shadows across the deck. Corvash's mandibles clicked in what his species considered deep thought. How much do they know? Fragments. Whispers. They know humans exist. That much is impossible to hide completely. But they believe the official reports. Lirthana moved beside him, her faceted features reflecting the starlight. That they're a pre-spaceflight species under protective observation. That they're decades away from faster-than-light travel. That they're unremarkable. Unremarkable, Corvash repeated, his voice carrying the weight of bitter irony. If only that were true. The word hung between them like a curse. Solar flare. Electromagnetic interference. The same lies we've been telling for 30 years. She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. How long can we maintain this charade, old friend? How long before someone discovers what humans are truly capable of? And the cover story? Lirthana's form shifted, light refracting through her crystalline body in patterns that spoke of deep concern. The Terran Defense Force destroyed another one of our monitoring stations yesterday. The automated one in the Oort cloud. That makes 17 this year. You know the answer to that question, he said finally. We maintain it for as long as we must. Because the alternative. But none of those challenges compared to the problem of humanity. Corvax turned from the viewport, his massive form casting shadows across the deck. At nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and natural armor plating, the Krillion was built for war. A remnant of his species' violent past before they'd transcended their brutal nature and joined galactic civilization. He'd fought in the border wars, commanded fleets during the synthetic uprising, and negotiated peace treaties with species whose very existence challenged the fundamental laws of physics. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Both of them remembered the Zephyrian incident. 300 years ago, the Zephyrians had been the galaxy's rising military power, a proud warrior race with technology that rivaled the core worlds in an expanding empire that seemed destined to reshape galactic politics. They'd been confident, arrogant even, secure in their belief that their advanced weapons and superior tactics made them unstoppable. But not the kind anyone had expected. Then they'd encountered a small human colony ship, barely 100 souls fleeing some long-forgotten conflict on their homeworld. The Zephyrians had demanded tribute as was their custom with lesser species. When the humans had politely declined and asked to be left alone, the Zephyrians had responded with overwhelming force. What followed could only be described as a massacre. The security footage from that encounter, Lirthana whispered, her voice carrying the weight of old nightmares. I still see it in my sleep. 60,000 Zephyrian warriors, the most advanced military technology in the known galaxy, and they couldn't even slow those humans down. Corvax nodded grimly. 112 humans, farmers, engineers, teachers, children, armed with nothing but improvised weapons and their ship's mining equipment. They held off the entire Zephyrian fleet for 6 days, and when reinforcements arrived, They found human children manning anti-ship cannons made from cargo containers and reactor parts. They found grandmothers who'd turned hydroponics bays into ammunition factories. They found humans who'd jury-rigged their life support systems into weapons delivery platforms. Korvash's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. And they found 60,000 dead Zephyrians. The silence stretched between them like a wound. In the distance, a massive cargo hauler was docking with the station, its hull scarred by the journey between stars. Normal, peaceful. Everything the galaxy pretended to be. The Zephyrians never recovered, Larthana continued. Their entire military doctrine, their cultural identity, their sense of superiority, it all crumbled in those 6 days. They retreated to their core worlds and never expanded again. To this day they refuse to speak of what they saw, because they saw the truth. Korvax moved away from the viewport, his steps heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. They saw what humans become when pushed too far. They saw why every advanced civilization in the galaxy fears them. No, it's not. It's their minds, the way they think, the way they adapt, the way they turn everything into a weapon. She paused, her crystalline features reflecting the station's lighting in fractured patterns. Do you know what our xenopsychologists call it? They can't turn it off, Korvash. Even when they're safe, even when they're at peace, part of their minds is always calculating threats, planning contingencies, preparing for war. It's written into their genetic code. It's part of who they are. The humans call it dual-use technology, he said, highlighting one of the vessels, a sleek ship labeled as a scientific survey vessel in the public records. To them, there's no meaningful distinction between exploration and warfare, between research and weapons development, between civilian infrastructure and military assets. But Korvash knew better. His intelligence networks had spent decades analyzing human technology, studying their ship designs, monitoring their communications. Every one of those civilian vessels could be converted into a warship within hours. Every research station was fortified enough to withstand a direct assault. Every exploration probe carried enough firepower to level a city. Korvax moved to his personal console, activating a holographic display that showed the current positions of all known human vessels in their solar system. The display showed dozens of ships, exploration vessels, research stations, automated probes, and what appeared to be civilian transports. And they built it using technology they supposedly haven't invented yet. According to human records, it's studying dark matter interactions in their outer system. Korvax expanded the display, revealing detailed schematics. According to our analysis, it's a prototype stealth bomber, with enough antimatter to crack a moon. That's the most terrifying part. Korvax deactivated the display, his compound eyes reflecting the ambient light of the station. Our projections show they shouldn't have developed faster than light travel for another 50 years. They shouldn't have antimatter containment for another century. They shouldn't have quantum communications for another 2 centuries. They do, and they're pretending they don't. But they do. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If humans had secretly developed advanced technology decades ahead of galactic projections, if they were deliberately concealing their capabilities while under supposedly protective observation, then the entire foundation of galactic security was built on a lie. Korvax turned, his full attention focused on his colleague. In all their years of working together, through wars and peace negotiations and political crises, he'd never heard that particular tone in her voice. There's something else, Larthana said, her voice dropping to barely audible levels. The monitoring station they destroyed yesterday before it went offline, it detected something. Fear. Larthana activated her own console, calling up data streams from the destroyed monitoring station. The holographic display showed the outer edges of the Sol system, a region that should have been empty except for scattered asteroids and ancient comets. Show me. Instead, the display showed massive geometric shapes, structures that hadn't been there a month ago. Construction platforms, Korvax whispered. They're building something. Not just building, they're building in secret, using materials they're mining from their own asteroid belt, with technology that officially doesn't exist, in a region of space where they know we can't monitor them effectively. Larthana enhanced the image, revealing details that made Korvash's chitinous skin crawl. "Look at the size of these structures." "What are they?" Korvash asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The geometric shapes weren't ships, they were orbital installations, massive constructs that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Even the Hegemony Station, with its 12,000-year history and accumulated technology from hundreds of species, would have been insignificant compared to what the humans were building. Unknown. Our xenoengineering specialists can't even begin to guess at their function. The power signatures alone suggest energy consumption on a stellar scale. The structural integrity requirements would challenge physics as we understand it. Lorthina paused, her form flickering with nervous energy. But there's something else. Something worse. Toward galactic civilization. She enhanced the display again, focusing on one section of the nearest construction platform. The image resolved into individual components, and Korvax felt his heart skip a beat. "They know," he said finally. "Somehow they know we're watching them. They know about the galactic community, and they're preparing for war." "It gets worse." Lashana called up another data stream, this one showing communication intercepts from the deepest levels of human government. The conversations were in their primitive languages, but the translation software had decoded enough to reveal their content. They call it Project Exodus, and according to these intercepts, it's not their first such project. Korvax studied the translations, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he processed the implications. References to previous incidents, mentions of galactic interference, discussions of preparing for revelation. They knew. They had always known. "How long?" he asked. Before Korvax could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Not the gentle chime that announced routine arrivals or departures, but the deep, resonant tone that meant only one thing: unknown. Possibly decades. Maybe longer. Lorthina deactivated the display, her crystalline form seeming to dim in the ambient light. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Emergency session of the Galactic Council, and someone somewhere had decided it was time to break the silence. This was about humanity. They looked at each other with the shared understanding of old colleagues who'd faced crisis together before. But this was different. This wasn't a border dispute or trade negotiation or diplomatic protocol. As they made their way through the station's corridors toward the council chambers, Korvax couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking toward the end of everything they'd spent their careers trying to protect. The weight of 30 years of lies pressed down on them like the gravity of a dying star. Behind them, through the observation deck's massive viewport, the binary stars of Calith continued their eternal dance. Two massive bodies locked in an orbit that would either last forever or end in mutual annihilation. Neither of them knew which outcome they were witnessing. The Grand Council chamber of Hegemony Station was a marvel of architectural impossibility. Carved from a single crystal that had grown in the zero-gravity void over centuries, its walls curved in geometries that seemed to shift depending on the observer's perspective. Representatives from nearly 400 species sat in carefully designed alcoves, each one environmentally controlled to meet the specific atmospheric and gravitational needs of its occupant. Today, the chamber buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with the station's power grid. The reaction was immediate and electric. Representatives who had been whispering among themselves fell silent. Those who had been reviewing data feeds looked up sharp. Even the most experienced diplomats, beings who had weathered galactic crises and interstellar wars, shifted uncomfortably in their environmental suits. "Esteemed colleagues, we gather in emergency session to address a matter of galactic security that has remained classified for 3 decades. The Chancellor's words carried the weight of absolute authority. Today we discuss the Terran question. Admiral Korvash and Councillor Lorthina took their designated positions just as Chancellor Zarathamal called the session to order. The hive-mind entity's thousand-body form rippled through the central speaking area like living liquid, its collective consciousness dressing the assembly with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The floor recognizes Admiral Korvash Veltar of the Krillian Defense Force," the Chancellor announced. Korvax rose, his massive form commanding attention as he moved to the speaker's podium. The weight of every gaze in the chamber pressed against his chitinous shell, but he'd faced worse pressure in the depths of space combat. This was just another form of warfare. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. For 30 years, this body has maintained a carefully constructed fiction regarding the third planet of the Sol system. We have told ourselves that humanity is a pre-technological species under protective observation. We have classified them as developmentally immature, potentially dangerous due to their death world origins, but ultimately containable. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the assembly. We have been lying. The chamber erupted. Representatives from a dozen species began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of alien languages and electronic translation overlays. Security protocols activated, flooding the chamber with harmonic dampeners designed to prevent the kind of sonic interference that could occur when hundreds of different species tried to communicate simultaneously. "Order," the Chancellor commanded, its thousand-body form pulsing with bioluminescent authority. "Admiral Korvash retains the floor." Counselor Livslavcerna, and spent the last 3 decades monitoring human development through a network of concealed observation posts and automated surveillance systems. "What we have discovered challenges every assumption we have made about this species." He activated the chamber's holographic display system, filling the air above the assembly with images of human technology. "These are classified intelligence files. What you are about to see has been restricted to level Omega clearance for 30 years. The noise subsided, but the tension remained palpable. Korvax could feel the focused attention of hundreds of alien minds, each one calculating the implications of his statement. "The humans have not simply achieved faster-than-light travel," Korvax continued. "They have developed technologies that surpass our own in several critical areas. Their material science is approximately 2 centuries ahead of galactic standard. Their energy generation methods operate on principles we don't understand. Their computer systems use quantum processing architectures that our best engineers can barely theorize." A voice cut through the chamber, high-pitched and rapid, the characteristic speech pattern of a Zephyrian representative. "Admiral, are you suggesting that this primitive species has somehow leapfrogged over galactic civilization? That they have independently developed superior technology?" The images began to cycle through the evidence they had accumulated. Human ships that moved faster than light without using any known propulsion system. Weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Industrial installations that produced materials that shouldn't exist according to galactic science. Korvax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Representative Kixelan, I am suggesting something far more disturbing. I am suggesting that they have been studying us." The silence that followed was profound. "Continue," the Chancellor commanded. "Our intelligence analysis suggests that humans have been aware of galactic civilization for at least 50 years. They have been observing our technology, studying our communication protocols, analyzing our weaknesses. The primitive facade they maintain is deliberate deception designed to prevent us from recognizing them as a threat." "They know about this facility," Korvax said, his voice carrying the weight of terrible certainty. "They know about our monitoring systems. They know about our military capabilities, and they are preparing for what they call inevitable contact." The holographic display changed, showing intercepted human communications and translated documents that revealed the scope of their knowledge. References to galactic politics, discussions of alien technological paradigms, detailed analyses of the vulnerabilities in Hegemony Station's defense grid. Military preparations. Project Exodus appears to be the construction of orbital battle platforms, using their own asteroid belt as raw materials. The energy signatures we've detected suggest weapons systems that could threaten planetary surfaces from interstellar distances. Representative Thisasandra of the Ethereal Collective, a species of energy beings who existed as living plasma, spoke with a voice like controlled lightning. "What kind of preparations, Admiral?" "That's impossible," interrupted Counselor Zethmore of the Hegemony Engineering Corps. "No species develops that kind of technology without observable testing phases. Our monitoring systems would have detected weapons development of that magnitude." Alirathan arose from her position, her crystalline form catching the chamber's lighting and casting prismatic patterns across the walls. "Counselor Zethmore, they did test their weapons. We simply didn't recognize the tests for what they were. 47 years ago, humans detonated what they called a hydrogen bomb in their upper atmosphere. The official explanation was a weapons test related to their primitive nuclear technology. The actual energy signature matches theoretical projections for contained antimatter detonation. She enhanced the display, revealing the true scale of the explosion. They weren't testing a nuclear weapon. They were testing antimatter containment systems. She activated her own holographic displays, showing data that made several representatives recoil in their environmental suits. 31 years ago, they launched what they called a space telescope to observe distant galaxies. The official mission profile described a passive observation platform. Each revelation struck the assembly like a physical blow. Representatives who had spent centuries believing in the fundamental superiority of galactic civilization were watching that certainty crumble before their eyes. 18 years ago, they began constructing what they called an international space station for scientific research. The official purpose was to study the effects of zero gravity on biological systems. The actual structure contains manufacturing facilities capable of producing exotic matter and energy projection systems that could serve as a planetary defense platform. All of them, Korvax said finally. How many of them know? Asked Representative Kix Allen, the Zephyrian's voice carrying a tremor that spoke of old nightmares. How many humans are aware of our existence? The chamber fell silent. They've known about us for decades, Lord Fauna added. But more than that, they've been planning for the day we revealed ourselves. Every major human government has contingency plans for first contact scenarios. Every military organization has protocols for asymmetric interstellar warfare. Every industrial consortium has conversion procedures for wartime production schedules. They've known about us for decades, Laitana added. But more than that, they've been planning for the day we revealed ourselves. Every major human government has contingency plans for first contact scenarios. Every military organization has protocols for asymmetric interstellar warfare. Every industrial consortium has conversion procedures for wartime production schedules. Not war, Korvash corrected. Survival. Remember, they are Deathworlders. Their entire evolutionary history is defined by facing impossible odds and finding ways to overcome them. To them, we are simply the largest predator they have yet encountered. The implications hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a toxic cloud. For 3 decades, galactic civilization had believed it was protecting humanity from the shock of discovering they weren't alone in the universe. Instead, humanity had been using that time to study their potential enemies and prepare for what they saw as inevitable conflict. She activated a new holographic display, showing what appeared to be a human governmental facility buried deep beneath one of their planetary landmasses. The structure was massive, larger than many space stations, carved from solid rock and reinforced with metals that shouldn't exist. This is what humans call the Deep Black Archive. It's located approximately 3 kilometers beneath their North American continent, and according to intercepted communications, it contains complete records of every interaction between humanity and galactic civilization for the last 50 years. The silence that followed was the kind that preceded natural disasters. They have records of our observation missions, Korvash continued. They have analysis of our technology. They have psychological profiles of our major political figures. They have strategic assessments of our military capabilities. He paused, his mandibles clicking rapidly. And they have complete tactical plans for defeating every major species in galactic civilization, including specific strategies for neutralizing this station, Larthana added. The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise was different. Not surprise or confusion, but fear. Pure primal fear that transcended species boundaries and spoke to the deepest survival instincts of every sapient being in the galaxy. Silence, the Chancellor commanded, its voice carrying enough harmonic force to temporarily stun several of the more sensitive species. We will have order in these proceedings. The chamber gradually quieted, but the fear remained. Korvax could taste it in the recycled air, the chemical signatures of terror from dozens of different species, each one processing the implications of what they had learned. Admiral, the Chancellor continued, what are your recommendations for addressing this threat? Korvax straightened to his full height, his forearms spread in the traditional Krillian gesture of absolute honesty. Honored Chancellor, I recommend immediate and complete disclosure. The reaction was instant and explosive. Representatives who moments before had been unified in their fear now turned on each other with the desperate fury of beings who saw their entire worldview collapsing. "You're suggesting we reveal the existence of galactic civilization to a species that has spent decades preparing to fight us?" Representative Kixellen's voice carried the high-pitched stress harmonics of a Zephyrian on the edge of panic. "A species that has already demonstrated the ability to destroy military forces 20 times their size. The alternative is to maintain a deception that is already failing," Corvash replied. "Our monitoring capabilities are being systematically eliminated. Our intelligence networks are being compromised. Our technological advantages are being neutralized." He gestured toward the holographic displays still showing evidence of human capabilities. "They know we exist. They know we've been watching them. And they are preparing for the day we stop pretending otherwise." "But if we reveal ourselves now," interjected Councillor Zethmore, "we lose any element of surprise. We lose any ability to control the terms of contact." The truth of her words settled over the assembly like a suffocating blanket. For 50 years, galactic civilization had believed itself to be the observer, the superior intelligence studying a primitive species from a position of overwhelming advantage. Instead, they had been the observed, the studied, the analyzed, the prey. "There is another option," came a new voice from the chamber's upper levels. All eyes turned toward the speaker, Representative Coltus of the Synthetic Collective, an artificial intelligence housed in a crystalline matrix that had been ancient when most species were still learning to use fire. "The Synthetic Collective has analyzed the data presented by Admiral Corvash and Councillor Lursana," the AI continued, its voice carrying the cold precision of pure logic. "Our conclusion is that humanity represents an existential threat to galactic civilization that cannot be contained through conventional diplomatic or military means." "What are you suggesting?" the Chancellor asked, though something in its thousand-body posture suggested it already knew the answer. "Preemptive elimination," Cultas replied without emotion. "Complete sterilization of the Sol system before human military capabilities can be fully deployed. We estimate a 73% probability of success if action is taken within the next 60 standard days." The chamber fell into a silence so profound that the station's environmental systems seemed deafening by comparison. "You're talking about genocide," whispered Representative Thisimzra, her plasma form flickering with what might have been horror. "I am talking about survival," Coltithes corrected. "Humanity has demonstrated clear hostile intent, superior technological development, and strategic planning capabilities that exceed our initial assessments. The logical response is elimination before they become an uncontainable threat." "And if we're wrong?" Lithothana asked. "If our intelligence is flawed, if humanity's preparations are defensive rather than offensive, then we will have eliminated a potential threat unnecessarily," the AI replied. "But we will have survived. The alternative, allowing humanity to continue developing while maintaining the pretense of ignorance, guarantees our eventual defeat or subjugation." The debate that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the moment when civilization looked into the abyss of its own moral foundations and saw nothing looking back. For 6 hours, representatives from 400 species argued the merits of genocide versus diplomacy, preemptive strike versus cautious observation, survival versus ethics. The chamber's environmental systems strained to process the chemical signatures of fear, anger, desperation, and terrible calculation. But beneath all the reasoned arguments and strategic assessments, one truth remained constant. Humanity was coming. Whether through diplomatic contact or military conquest, whether as potential allies or inevitable enemies, the age of galactic isolation was ending. And somewhere in the deep black archives beneath Earth's crust, human analysts were watching the transmission intercepts from their hidden sensors throughout Hegemony Station, studying every word of the debate that would determine their species' fate. The Watchers had become the watched. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. 218 votes for immediate disclosure and diplomatic contact. 219 votes for preemptive military action. By a single vote, the Galactic Council had chosen war. Admiral Korvax stood in the command center of the Hegemony Defense Force flagship Eternal Vigilance, watching as the largest military fleet in galactic history prepared to jump to hyperspace. 12,000 vessels from 43 different species, each one representing the pinnacle of their civilization's military technology. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, stealth ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons platforms that channeled the power of entire stars. It should have been overwhelming. It should have been absolute. Instead, Korvax felt like he was watching a funeral procession. "Fleet status report," he commanded, his forearms working the tactical displays with mechanical precision. "All vessels report ready for hyperspace transition," replied his tactical officer, a Viridian whose crystalline form reflected the command center's tactical lighting in patterns of red and amber. "Estimated arrival at Sol system in 14 standard hours. And our intelligence updates? Unchanged, Admiral. Human construction activities continue at their outer system installations. No apparent awareness of our approach." But Korvax knew better. If humanity had spent 50 years studying galactic civilization, if they had been preparing for this moment since their first detection of alien observation, then they knew exactly what was coming. The question was, what were they planning to do about it? "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony Station. Chancellor Zerethmal requests immediate conference." Korvax activated his personal communication array, and the familiar thousand-body form of the Chancellor materialized in holographic projection beside him. "Admiral, I want to be absolutely clear about our mission parameters." The Chancellor began without preamble. "This is not a conquest. This is not an occupation. This is complete sterilization of all human presence in the Sol system." "Understood, Chancellor. The fleet is prepared to implement Protocol 7 across all planetary and orbital installations. That includes their homeworld. Admiral, complete atmospheric burn-off, followed by surface bombardment to ensure elimination of all subsurface installations. Nothing can be allowed to survive." The words hung in the command center's recycled air like a death sentence. Protocol 7 was reserved for species that represented existential threats to galactic civilization. Civilizations so dangerous that their complete elimination was considered preferable to any form of coexistence. It had been used exactly twice in galactic history. Both times, the targeted species had been extinct within 72 hours. "Admiral," the Chancellor continued, "I know this weighs heavily on your conscience, but remember what we learned from the Zephyrian incident. Remember what humans are capable of when they're cornered. We cannot afford to show mercy." "Understood, Chancellor. The fleet will execute Protocol 7 upon arrival." The holographic projection faded, leaving Korvash alone with the weight of genocide pressing against his chitinous shell like the gravity of a collapsing star. "All vessels," he broadcast to the fleet, "prepare for hyperspace transition on my mark." Around him, 12,000 ships began the final preparations that would carry them across the galaxy to humanity's doorstep. Each vessel represented centuries of technological development, generations of scientific advancement, the accumulated military might of the most powerful civilization in galactic history. "Mark!" The stars shifted. 14 hours later, the Galactic Defense Force fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Weapons powered and targeting systems active. What they found waiting for them would be analyzed and debated by military historians for centuries to come. Nothing. The system appeared exactly as their intelligence reports had indicated. 8 planets orbiting a single yellow star with the usual collection of asteroids, comets, and space debris. The third planet, Earth, showed the familiar blue-green signature of a life-bearing world. Their sensors detected the expected electromagnetic signatures of a pre-technological civilization, radio transmissions, primitive satellite networks, industrial pollution. "Sensor sweep complete," reported the tactical officer. "No signs of advanced technology. No weapons signatures. No defensive installations." Korvax studied the displays, his compound eyes tracking the familiar orbital mechanics of humanity's solar system. Everything appeared normal, peaceful. Exactly what a pre-technological species should look like to visiting aliens. What about the construction platforms? The installations in their outer system? No trace, Admiral. If there were ever any large-scale construction projects in the outer system, they've been completely removed or concealed. That's impossible. You don't just hide industrial installations the size of small moons. I'm showing you the sensor data, sir. Whatever our intelligence services detected 6 months ago, it's not there now. Korvax felt the first stirrings of something that might have been unease. In his experience, enemies who could make massive military installations disappear without a trace were enemies who had resources and capabilities beyond their apparent technological level. Begins systematic approach to the inner system. All vessels maintain maximum alert status. Full spectrum scanning on all targets. The fleet began its inexorable advance toward humanity's homeworld, 12,000 ships moving in perfect formation through the vacuum between worlds. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, crewed by beings whose species had been perfecting the arts of war for millennia. They had covered approximately half the distance to Earth when the trap was sprung. The first indication was a subtle shift in the local gravitational field, barely detectable but enough to trigger automated warning systems throughout the fleet. Then came the electromagnetic signatures, massive power sources activating throughout the system, energy patterns that violated several fundamental laws of physics. And then the humans revealed themselves. They didn't decloak. They didn't emerge from behind planets or asteroids. They didn't power up hidden installations or activate camouflaged weapons. Instead, reality simply shifted. Where moments before there had been empty space, now there were ships, hundreds of them, each one larger than the Galactic Defense Force's heaviest dreadnoughts, built according to engineering principles that made Korvash's brain hurt to contemplate. "How?" whispered the tactical officer. "How did they hide ships that large? Our sensors should have detected gravitational distortions, energy signatures, mass displacement. They weren't hiding them," Korvax said, understanding flooding through his consciousness like ice water through his veins. "They were building them, in real time, using principles we don't understand." The human ships, if they could be called ships, defied every convention of spacecraft design that galactic civilization had developed over millennia. They appeared to be constructed from materials that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, their hulls reconfiguring themselves even as the Galactic Defense Force watched. Energy patterns danced across their surfaces in geometries that hurt to observe directly. "Admiral," came an urgent voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. It's in perfect galactic standard." On screen, the main display shimmered, and suddenly Korvax found himself looking at a human face. The being appeared young by human standards. Smooth skin, bright eyes, the kind of expression that suggested intelligence tempered by something that might have been amusement. But there was something else in those eyes, something that made Korvax's combat instinct scream warnings. "Greetings, Admiral Korvash Veltar of the Krillian Defense Force," the human said, its voice carrying through the command center with perfect clarity. "My name is Commander Rachel Torres of the Terran Defense Initiative. We've been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time." The casual use of his name and rank sent shockwaves through the command center. This wasn't first contact. This was a conversation between enemies who knew each other intimately. "How long?" Korvash asked, his mandibles clicking with the stress of terrible realization. "How long have we known about you? How long have we been preparing for this moment? How long have we been listening to your communications and studying your technology?" The human's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile but carried too much predatory calculation to be reassuring. "Admiral, we detected your first observation probe 53 years, 4 months and 16 days ago. We've been preparing for this conversation ever since." Around Korvash, his command crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to make sense of sensor readings that violated the basic principles of physics. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, energy weapons that seemed to draw power directly from the quantum foam of space-time itself. Defense systems that operated on principles that galactic science couldn't even theorize. "You came here to commit genocide," Commander Torres continued, her voice never losing its conversational tone. "Protocol 7, complete sterilization, atmospheric burn-off followed by surface bombardment. We know because we've been monitoring your communications since your fleet left Hegemony Station." "That's impossible," Korvax replied automatically. "Our communications are quantum encrypted across 17 different dimensional matrices. No known technology can—" "Admiral, we've been studying your technology for over half a century. We reverse-engineered your encryption protocols 30 years ago. We've been reading your mail, listening to your conversations, and watching your strategic planning sessions since before some of your crew members were born." The implications crashed over Corvash like a tsunami of realization. If humans had been monitoring Galactic Defense Force communications for decades, then they knew everything: fleet movements, tactical doctrines, weapons capabilities, strategic weaknesses. They had been studying their enemies with the same methodical precision that galactic civilization had been studying them. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "We want what every species wants, Admiral. We want to survive. We want our children to have a future. We want to explore the galaxy and learn from other civilizations and contribute to something larger than ourselves." Commander Torres paused, her expression growing more serious. "But we also want to be very clear about something. We will not be exterminated. We will not be conquered. We will not be subjugated or controlled or managed by beings who see us as a threat to be eliminated." "You are a threat," Korvax said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Your species represents an existential danger to galactic civilization. Your technological development, your military capabilities, your psychological profiles, everything about you suggests inevitable conflict." "You're probably right," Torres agreed, and her casual admission sent another shockwave through the command center. "We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We do turn everything we touch into a potential weapon because that's how we survived on a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us." She gestured, and the display expanded to show views of Earth from orbit. Not the peaceful blue-green marble that their sensors had indicated, but a world that pulsed with technological activity. Cities that stretched across continents, orbital installations that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization, industrial complexes that seemed to reshape geography as they operated. "But here's what your psychological profiles missed, Admiral. Here's what 50 years of observation couldn't teach you about humanity." Torres leaned forward, her eyes focusing on Korvax with laser intensity. "We only fight when we're threatened. We only kill when we have no other choice. We only become monsters when someone tries to make us extinct. And you've just tried to make us extinct." The silence that followed was the kind that preceded natural disasters. Around the command center, tactical displays showed energy readings that climbed beyond the scales that galactic technology could measure. The human ship's impossible constructs of flowing metal and controlled energy began moving into attack formations that demonstrated strategic thinking several generations ahead of current galactic military doctrine. Admiral Torres continued, "I'm going to make you an offer. One time, non-negotiable, expires in approximately 60 seconds. You can order your fleet to withdraw to a safe distance, return to Hegemony Station and report that humanity is ready for formal diplomatic contact on equal terms. Or you can proceed with your original mission and discover exactly why every advanced species in the galaxy has nightmares about Deathworlders." Korvash looked around his command center, studying the faces of beings who had devoted their lives to protecting galactic civilization. Soldiers and scientists, engineers and tacticians, representatives of species who had transcended their violent origins to build something resembling peace among the stars. All of them were terrified. "Tactical assessment," he ordered quietly. "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer replied, her crystalline form flickering with patterns of deep uncertainty. "Human capabilities exceed our analytical parameters. Their ships operate on principles we can't understand using technologies we can't identify. Even if we achieved total tactical surprise, our probability of victory is minimal." "Define minimal." Korvax closed his compound eyes, feeling the weight of 12,000 ships and their crews pressing against his consciousness. Behind him, the tactical displays showed human vessels that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously, energy readings that suggested weapons capable of sterilizing entire solar systems, and defensive systems that made his own fleet look like primitive projectile weapons by comparison. In his earpiece, he could hear the voice of Chancellor Zirith Maul, transmitted from Hegemony Station across the light years. "Admiral, you have your orders. Execute Protocol 7 immediately." But Korvash was thinking of the Zephyrian incident. He was thinking of 60,000 elite warriors destroyed by farmers and children and grandmothers who had turned mining equipment into weapons of mass destruction. He was thinking of what humanity might become if they were truly pushed to the edge of extinction. "Fleet Command," he broadcast to his 12,000 ships. "This is Admiral Corvash. All vessels are ordered to stand down and assume defensive positions only. Do not repeat. Do not engage human forces unless directly fired upon." "Admiral," came Commander Torsa's voice, and for the first time she sounded genuinely surprised. "That's not what we expected. Commander, I've spent 30 years studying your species. I know what you're capable of when you're fighting for survival. I know what happened to the Zephyrians. I know what you did to them with mining equipment and cargo containers." He paused, his mandibles clicking slowly. "I will not be responsible for finding out what you can do with technology that exceeds our own." "Then what happens now?" Korvax looked at his tactical displays one more time, studying the impossible human ships that hung in space like three-dimensional riddles wrapped in physics that shouldn't exist. "Now, Commander Torres, we find out if two civilizations that were designed to destroy each other can figure out how to coexist instead. You realize your government isn't going to be happy with this decision." "Let me worry about the Galactic Council," Korvash replied. "You just make sure your people understand that this fleet represents the largest military force in galactic history, and I've just bet everything on the possibility that humans can be reasoned with instead of destroyed." Commander Torres was quiet for several long moments. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Admiral, there's something you need to know. Something your intelligence services never discovered despite 50 years of observation." The display shifted, showing what appeared to be a massive structure hidden in the asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets of the Sol system. "This is Project Exodus. The construction platforms your people detected weren't weapons, Admiral. They were ships." "Ships?" "Colony ships. Each one designed to carry approximately 50 million humans and all the resources necessary to establish self-sufficient civilizations around distant stars." She paused, letting the implications settle. "We weren't preparing to fight you, Admiral. We were preparing to leave." The revelation hit Korvax like a physical blow. For 50 years, galactic civilization had assumed that humanity's secretive technological development was aimed at conquest or defense. Instead, they had been planning evacuation. "We knew this moment would come eventually," Torres continued. "We knew that sooner or later, galactic civilization would decide we were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. So we prepared to scatter across the galaxy, to establish human colonies so far apart and so well hidden that no single military action could eliminate all of us." "How many ships?" 3,000. "Each one capable of faster-than-light travel using principles your scientists haven't discovered yet. Each one carrying enough humans to restart civilization if necessary." Her expression grew deadly serious. "Admiral, if your fleet had attacked Earth without warning, if you had caught us unprepared, you might have succeeded in destroying our homeworld. But within hours, 3,000 colony ships would have launched to every corner of the galaxy. And then? And then you would have faced not one species of dangerous deathworlders, but 3,000 separate human civilizations, each one convinced that galactic society had committed genocide against their homeworld. Each one dedicated to ensuring that such a thing could never happen again." The silence that followed was profound. Korvax found himself contemplating a galaxy where human colonies established themselves in hidden systems throughout the spiral arms, each one developing independently, each one carrying the genetic and cultural memory of their species near extinction at the hands of alien civilizations. It would have been the end of galactic peace. It would have been the beginning of a war that could last millennia. "But that's not going to happen," Torres said, her voice carrying something that might have been hope. "Because you made a different choice, Admiral. You chose to listen instead of shoot. You chose to risk your career and possibly your life on the possibility that humans and aliens could find a better way forward. And can we find a better way?" Commander Torres smiled, and for the first time since the conversation began, it looked genuinely warm instead of calculated. "Admiral, humanity has spent 4 billion years learning how to survive on a world that was trying to kill us. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to work together despite our differences. We've spent the last 50 years preparing for the day we would meet other intelligent species." She gestured again, and the display showed images that made Korvash's compound eyes widen with surprise. Human cities, where the architecture seemed designed to accommodate beings of different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Human universities, where the curriculum included xenobiology and comparative philosophy. Human children learning languages that didn't yet have speakers. We've been getting ready to meet you, Admiral. All of you, not as conquerors or victims, but as neighbors, especially after that. Because now we know something about galactic civilization that we didn't know before. Her expression grew serious again. We know that you're capable of fear. We know that you make mistakes. We know that some of you, at least, are capable of changing your minds when presented with new evidence. Torres paused, studying Korvax through the communications link. We know that you're not so different from us after all. 3 hours later, Admiral Korvax stood once again in the Grand Council chamber of Hegemony Station, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Commander Rachel Torres, the first human to set foot on a galactic installation. Her presence had required extensive modifications to the chamber's environmental systems, but the engineering challenges were nothing compared to the political earthquakes her arrival had triggered. Honored representatives, Korvax began. I present Commander Torres of the Terran Defense Initiative, speaking on behalf of the human species in their first official contact with galactic civilization. The chamber was quieter than he'd ever experienced it. 400 species, beings whose ancestors had been exploring the galaxy since before humanity had discovered agriculture, sat in absolute silence as they studied the alien who had traveled from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Commander Torres stepped forward, her movements careful and deliberate in the chamber's modified atmosphere. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the acoustic enhancement systems. My species comes before you not as conquerors or supplicants, but as neighbors seeking to find our place in galactic civilization. We know that our development has been unconventional. We know that our technologies and our psychology represent challenges to the established order. We know that some of you see us as a threat that must be eliminated or controlled. She paused, her eyes moving across the assembled representatives. But we also know something else. We know that diversity makes ecosystems stronger. We know that different perspectives lead better solutions. We know that the universe is vast enough and dangerous enough that all intelligent species are stronger when they work together than when they work apart. Representative QX Alan of the Zephyrian spoke first, his voice carrying the high-pitched harmonics of deep stress. Torres, your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed galactic civilization despite being observed for only 50 years. How can we trust beings who develop so rapidly and so secretively? Torres nodded, acknowledging the fear behind the question. Representative Killes, Ignalan, rapid development is a survival trait for Deathworlders. Our homeworld taught us to adapt quickly, or die. But adaptation and aggression are not the same thing. We developed our technologies in secret because we believed correctly, as it turned out that revealing them would result in our extinction. You prepared weapons, accused Counselor Zethmore of the Engineering Corps. Your installations were clearly designed for military purposes. Counselor, we prepared to defend ourselves. There's a difference. Every species in this chamber has military forces. Every civilization maintains the ability to protect itself from threats. We simply did so while operating under the assumption that we would eventually need to protect ourselves from you. The questions continued for hours. Human technological capabilities, development timelines, population demographics, resource requirements, territorial ambitions. Torres answered them all with patience and precision, never deflecting, never obfuscating, never claiming ignorance of capabilities that galactic intelligence had already confirmed. Finally, Chancellor Zerathimol spoke, its thousand-body form rippling with bioluminescent patterns of deep consideration. Commander Torres, what does humanity want from galactic civilization? The same thing every species wants, Chancellor. Recognition, respect, the opportunity to contribute to something larger than ourselves while maintaining our autonomy and our right to exist. She paused, her expression growing more serious. And protection, not protection from external threats, but protection from the fear that seems to drive so much of galactic policy regarding species that don't fit established patterns. You're asking us to trust you. I'm asking you to trust yourselves, to trust the principles that built galactic civilization in the first place. to trust that diversity and cooperation are stronger than homogeneity and control. Chancellor Zareth Mal was quiet for several long moments, its collective consciousness processing implications that would reshape galactic politics for generations. The chair recognizes a motion for formal vote on the admission of humanity to galactic civilization as a sovereign member species with all attendant rights and responsibilities. The vote, when it came, was not close. 437 votes in favor, 0 against. As the chamber erupted in the controlled chaos of 400 different species, celebrating the peaceful resolution of what could have been the greatest crisis in galactic history, Admiral Korvax found himself standing next to Commander Torres in a bubble of relative quiet. "Commander," he said, his mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement, "I have a question that's been bothering me since our first conversation." "What's that, Admiral?" "How long have you known that this moment would end with humanity joining galactic civilization rather than being destroyed by it?" Torres was quiet for a moment, her eyes studying the celebration surrounding them. "Admiral, there's something about Deathworlders that your psychological profiles missed. Something that 4 billion years of surviving on a hostile world taught us that other species never had to learn. Which is, hope is a survival trait. No matter how desperate the situation, no matter how impossible the odds, no matter how powerful the enemy, there's always a chance that things can get better. You just have to be willing to bet everything on that possibility." She turned to look at him directly, her eyes carrying depths that spoke of genetic memories stretching back to ancestors who had faced predators with nothing but stones and determination. "We bet everything on the possibility that when the moment came when you had to choose between fear and hope, between destruction and creation, between the past and the future, we bet that you would choose to be better than your fears. And if you had been wrong? Then 3,000 human colony ships would have launched into deep space carrying our species to every corner of the galaxy, and we would have spent the next millennium proving that hope was stronger than fear anyway." Admiral Korvax looked out across the Grand Council chamber, watching beings from 400 different worlds celebrating the peaceful integration of a species that had spent 50 years preparing for war. In the distance, through the chamber's massive viewports, he could see the binary stars of Kalothes continuing their eternal dance, 2 massive bodies locked in an orbit that would last forever. Not mutual annihilation, mutual support. And for the first time in 30 years, Admiral Korvash allowed himself to believe that the galaxy might actually be big enough for everyone.